There we are. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for spending your evening with Fleisher. Fleisher from a Distance, the Wind Challenge edition, is a special program designed to showcase Wind Challenge artists through the years. The Fleisher Challenge was founded in 1978 as a platform for local artists to exhibit. This effort was later generously supported by Dina and Jerry Wind through the Wind Foundation, bringing the Wind Challenge to the forefront of exhibitions in Philadelphia. Now, this important exhibition is supported by the Dina Wind Art Foundation, and I invite you to find out more by visiting the Dina Wind Foundation.art. I will place this address in the chat so you guys can visit later. This is one of the most prestigious exhibitions in our area, and every year 6 to 9 artists are selected to exhibit in our galleries. Tonight's artist, Jessica Curtaz, was selected for the 2019, am I right, Jessica? Was it 2019? Okay, the 2019 Wind Challenge. It feels like it's been ages ago.
Oh, it's kind of like a year that's been missing. So
right, that's what it is.
Kind of like it just happened, actually.
So anyway, I just didn't introduce you, Jessica, but yes, the person talking here with me is Jessica. Jessica, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
It's great to have you here for many reasons. I mean, one, because you're gonna be sharing an hour with me here, and also because you're gonna showcase your work. And in addition to that, Jessica, there's a show, that a gallery show is right now only virtual, that just opened at the Dina Wind Foundation, and you can see a lot of her work there. So I will put that in the chat, but I know that Jessica will touch into this. She'll talk about this as well. But yes, please do visit the viewing room at the Dina Wind Art Foundation so you can check it out. And there'll be more artists coming as well in the next few months. Anyway, so let's get started. So Jessica, the 2019 Wind Challenge, which was like ages ago, and and that's how I met you. That was the first time I met you. And were you in Philadelphia for a long time then, or?
About 10 years. So I'm originally from California, but we moved out here 2009, I guess.
Oh wow. Okay. So and you moved from California, am I right? Or
right? Yeah.
Okay. So so you're basically now a Philadelphian. And I bet you, yeah. and then, you know, I met you, you were installing, and that's how I got to know your work. And I know that your whole family moved here with you. And how do you like Philly?
Well, I love Philly. I plan to stay in Philly.
It will be kind of odd if you say, I hate it.
No, well, like, well, what do you expect me to say? But I mean, also, I think my work has evolved since I've been here, and now it feels very place specific. And so it would be very, I mean, I suppose that I would adjust wherever I ended up, but especially what I've been doing for the last 6 years feels a little bit Philadelphia specific.
That's awesome. So instead of us talking, because I could talk to you for the rest of the hour, but I rather that you give your presentation so people can enjoy that. So go ahead, take it away.
Okay, then I'm gonna share my screen and bring this up. So I'm starting with some work that I did back in California. I kind of think of this as the beginning of everything that led to what I do now. I moved into a new studio, and the person who had that studio before me was a drawer. Before I did this, I was a printmaker, a watercolor artist. I did mixed media. And the moment that I started working in that studio, I only did drawings. And I started making these wire sculptures that I started then drawing. So these are all based on models that I made. And I liked that from a distance, they looked like something else. They looked like water kind of reticulating. I was able to really play with tone, with directionality, with flow. And every once in a while, I would get away from the idea of the models. And then I always felt like they became too pretty. I would make lines that were too curved that just looked nice, as opposed to sticking with these really strange little model things that I made. And I felt like it lost something whenever they went in that direction. But the wires led to other things. So they led to chicken fencing and chain link. I, at the time, happened to live next door to a fencing service, and they let me go through their dumpster and pick all the ends of the chain link that they didn't want to stretch. And so just like those first wire drawings, all of these are based on real life models. And I was really sad because when I moved from California to Philadelphia, we packed everything in a U-Haul. And I felt like it was a little crazy to bring, you know, handfuls of, like armfuls of chain link with me. So I had to leave all my chain link behind. But once here, I started looking for other things that had repetitive patterns. And I started playing with the ideas of areas that were highly shaded versus areas that were just line drawings. I liked that the pine cones looked sort of like fractals. Again, I played with overlap. I wanted you to be able to tell what these were in some places, and other places I wanted them to descend into complete abstraction. These are hydrangea blossoms. And the first hydrangea drawings looked actually like hydrangeas, but I realized that what I was interested in were just the little veins within the hydrangeas and those little tiny shadows that happen within those venations. And I wanted to layer them because I was interested in that kind of buzzing effect that happened from a distance. I liked that they looked like moving shadows or sunlight through leaves. Again, I play a lot with overlap and with artificial breaks. I like to set up rules for myself when I make a drawing and then stick to those rules and kind of see what happens. These are Osage oranges. And so again, you can see where they descend into line and where they look more like the real Osage orange, which if anybody doesn't know, looks kind of like a giant green rice ball. They're really exciting. I'd never seen an Osage orange before I moved to the East Coast. And then I came to the realization that I didn't have to just draw one object in a drawing, that I could make up these strange pilings up and conglomerations of things with multiple pieces. So everything that I had ever drawn before became like a brush stroke for me. It became just something that I would use in a certain circumstance. And so again, I just piled these up. I wanted you to be able to tell in some places what they were. This one has a paper airplane in it. It has those Osage oranges. It has some leaves, and it has some folded up pieces of origami. I got more and more into, I like to make things complicated, I'll have to say. So everything I do kind of starts out relatively simple, and the more I do it, the more complicated it gets. My surfaces are really important as these as well. So these are done on paper, but they're gessoed paper with 3 to 6 layers of gesso, which I then polish. with wet dry sandpaper. So they have a sheen to them that's reflective and can take like the tiniest bit of graphite. Let's see, just a minute. I'm having some errors here. It won't let me go forwards or backwards or escape. Do you think you can end my thing, yeah, Gerard, for a minute? So that... Okay, thanks. All right, I'm going to try to share that again. And all right, it went away. So just a minute, I'm going to reopen. I think it just crashed. So I'm just going to reopen it. Sorry about that. Too many images. I have like 92 images, and as a result,
I bet that's what it is.
Let's see. Okay, something just came up again. All right, I've got it back up, so I'm going to share my screen. All right.
And how big are these, Jessica?
They range in size. So these ones are fairly small. I think they're like 1 foot by 2 feet type of things. But the biggest one is 6 by 6 feet.
Oh, wow.
So they can be really huge. But most of them, especially the more recent ones, are pretty manageable. So I think this one, like I said, is like 24 inches by 12. And this leads into my cable knit series. All of these were done with the same sweater. And I liked how the knitting had structure and had those reoccurring patterns, and at the same time could be stretched or bunched up in different ways. So as always, I played with overlap and with shading. And this led into a new job for me. So my daughter turned 6, she went back to kindergarten, and I was looking to go back into teaching. And the Center for Creative Works was looking for a fiber artist. And it's a day program that teaches art to adults with developmental disabilities. And I talked my way into this job based on my drawings being sort of like fiber art and being crafty and doing things like needlepoint and crochet. So I started teaching needlework, teaching tufted embroidery, teaching crochet, finger knitting, loom knitting. And this led to doing a couple of residencies at the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. Again, this is teaching finger knitting and loom knitting. And as part of these projects, I would show work by fiber artists who I thought were doing the most interesting work around. And I really was trying to get some of my students to use what I was teaching to do projects, to do different sorts of projects. So London Kay, for example, is a street artist out of New York. And I don't know, I just find her work really exciting, and partly because it's so accessible, that it's just on the street. I love that it's not only on the fences, but that it goes off onto the sidewalk. This Band-Aid I always found really exciting. And then of course, Ishnitz, who is a local yarn bomber in Philadelphia. She does mostly lettering types of work. This is one of my favorite pieces that was outside the art museum, that she felt like that more people went to go see the Rocky statue than went to go see art. So she made this. And
Rocky
I was
never looked that good.
totally. But I wasn't able to convince a single student of mine to do anything like this. And so I thought that I was really, obviously I wasn't understanding like the intricacies of street art if I was unable to convince anybody to do it. So I decided that I really needed to go out and just start doing it. And then I would be able to convince my students that this was an awesome thing to do. And so this was one of my first pieces. And, you know, there's not much to it. It was just about the act of like going out there and making something and putting it out in the world and being totally nervous because there was people walking by and I felt really awkward. But it was kind of addictive and I kept going, and things tended to get more complicated with my work as they do. And this is my daughter in the background board as I am installing this piece on a post. And things got bigger. I started trying to figure things out. The first time I installed a really huge piece, it was on a really busy road at rush hour. And I didn't think about pinning it up ahead of time. And it was falling down on my head as I was trying to put it up. And there was like cars going by and it was humiliating and I was shaking. But, you know, I figured out that you can use binder clips to hold crochet in place while you position it to put it up. So this praying mantis was one of my first big pieces. This one was sort of a breakthrough piece for me. I'm completely self-taught when it comes to crochet. I learned from a book that my mother had in the 60s. And mostly what I do is experiment. I knew sort of the theory behind color strand knitting, and I thought that maybe crochet would work similarly. So I just started working colors in. I don't know how, you know, real crocheters do it. I just do what works, and I don't really worry about what the back of my pieces look like at all. So this is the first time that multiple colors were used at all in a piece. And then it was featured by Conrad on the Street Step website. So I got quite a bit of attention for it. I also got it vandalized within a week. So it stayed up for a little while. I actually remade it, put it back up, and I think it lasted 3 days before someone tore it down and tore it into pieces all over the street. But I started making more work with more colors that really actually looked more like those things that I was trying to make them look like. Sometimes a piece would stay up for 24 hours. This one I think stayed up for about 6 months. Sometimes I made them specifically for certain fences, and sometimes I would just make the piece and wander around the city until it felt like the right spot to put it. These artichokes I did for Greensgrow. This was the first time someone gave me permission to put something up, which I found at the time it was so exciting that, you know, I took a ladder out there. I'm like, if somebody's gonna give me permission, then I'm gonna do the stuff that I would never dare to do if I was putting this up, you know, illegally.
And they're still there too.
Are they?
Yeah.
I feel kind of bad about that because the last time I saw them, they were looking a little sad, but then the pandemic hit and I, you know, thought, well, that's how it goes.
How long ago was that? the Greensboro, you think?
Oh, like 4 years ago, maybe.
Wow, I'm still there. That's really amazing. Yeah.
It was a long, yeah, it was a while ago. This one I did at the Kensington Health Sciences Academy, and it was part of a 3-piece one that went around this whole corner. I was trying to create a garden. I had originally intended to do the entire fence, but it was completely torn apart one night, so into about 200 pieces. And I don't know, I couldn't make myself go back and put more up into it, since each of these took about a month to make in the first place. And at the time, I was really playing with the idea that if I was to put these in, I wanted to put the same effort into these that I was putting, that would be on the street, as that would be in a gallery. Around this time, I got my first commission. So I got to do this kind of urban garden in a children's playroom at the Versailles building. And then this is back at the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. So I kind of think of this as the place that this project started, since it was this group of kids that I was trying to convince to do street art. And in talking with their art teacher there, we came up with a plan to do just that, to make these giant collaborative pieces that could be shown both outside and inside. As part of the project, I started making pieces that could be on the fences around the school. This is their early childhood group.
How was their response to these? Did they?
Yeah, well, this one, the eyes were up for a year, and I came back the next year thinking I would take them down because they were looking kind of icky. And the kids and the teachers really wanted them to stay. And so I left them there. So they're still there. And the projects that we did, they started with just the high school. This was the first one, where the kids decided on what the words were going to be and finger knit them around the hand. The hand is designed by Nancy Rourke, who works with the idea of Devia Arts, which is deaf, let me look it up. Deaf view image art, which is art that examines the deaf experience. So therefore it's the hand is supposed to represent the 5 senses, and this finger being down is for hearing. So it's the 5 senses minus hearing, but instead you have the eye in the middle of the palm, since you communicate with your hands and your eyes. And then of course the paintbrush. And this one was outside at Mainline Art Center for about, I don't know, 5 months before we brought it inside, cleaned it up a little bit, and returned it to the school for them to show there. And so all of these that I do with the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf are also in conjunction with Mainline Art Center, who provided the funding for this. So this was another one. This one, the pieces in the middle are done with that early childhood group. So they're just embroidery pieces. And then the outside is done by the high school with finger knitting. This is done by a broader range of kids there. I think it was early childhood through junior high. And the eye bird is designed by Arnaud Billard, who is a deaf-blind artist. We had his permission to use the imagery. And again, it has to do with communication, the use of eyes and hands, and the idea of how communication would make one feel free. More hand eye birds. We quite liked these. And this one has, there's a permanent version of it at the upper level of Mainline Art Center. And during this, I kept putting more pieces out in the world. This one, someone hated so much that they cut off the fence and just left the legs there so that I would know that they didn't take it because they liked it, but took it because they hated it so much. This is a fox in a box. And I brought a ladder with me out onto the street on Spring Garden to install this. And it was one of the most embarrassing pieces that I've ever put up, just because it was so huge. I had someone in a car behind the gate staring at me in a not pleasant way while I was putting it up on my ladder at rush hour.
Did they ever talk to you?
No, no one ever, like, I wondered, I was like, oh, is he going to come over and tell me I need to take it down? You know, is there going to be some complaints? The building had actually asked me to do a piece at one time, but then they said that I had to get permission through this other like body. And at the time I decided not to get permission. And so I just put it up. So it lasted, I think, only about 2 weeks before they took it down. This is my fire-breathing rainbow piranha over the Gerrard Street Bridge. And it got some attention. Philly Mag featured it in an article about Philadelphia street art. Star Gardens has always been one of my favorite places to put work. I feel like, I don't know, kids like my work. I feel like it's kind of for kids a lot of the time. You know, it's something that you can touch and poke and is supposed to be, you know, funny and fantastical. This is my studio. It's kind of a disaster, and it pretty much always looks like this. After a project, or during a project, I should say, after a project, I try to clean it up so that I can be ready for the next project. This is in the middle of the installation that I did for the Philadelphia airport. And originally, when I talked to Leah Douglas, who's the main curator there, she had told me that she was going to give me this large wall space to work on. But when I went in to look at the space, she had changed her mind, and she had given me these 5 pretty large plexiglass boxes. And it scared me to death. I was like, well, what am I going to do in a plexiglass box? Isn't this for sculpture? I didn't know how to handle it at all. And so I thought that I would use glue to stiffen what I was doing, and that somehow it would be freestanding within those plexiglass boxes, or that I would get a bunch of chain link and build sculptures with the chain link and do my work around it. And none of those things really worked at all. But then I got the idea that I would just bring the chain link inside and suspend them inside the boxes. But I was still really into this idea of stiffening things and doing things that I couldn't do when I was outside. So I used the glue and started making pieces that kind of had form to them. So there was still the 2-dimensional pieces on the chain link, but then there was pieces that came off of it in different ways. So the wings of the beetle.
So you end up hanging the chain link. Is that what you end up doing?
Hung the chain link. And actually her team hung the chain link. So it was all them. I didn't have to figure out the logistics of it at all, which was quite glorious.
I bet.
It really was.
And going back to your studio, like, I just love that you say that, because we artists, we dream about this clean studio always, and it just never happens.
Well, as soon as it happens, I make a mess again. So.
Right. So it's only in magazines you ever see those clean studios.
Yeah. Completely. So this is that entire show. And then Leah came to me and wanted me to be in a group show at the Philadelphia airport. And again, she had this idea of the space that I needed to fill. And it was a window space. And so I did this drawing for her of roses. I listened to a lot of books on tape while I'm making these. It's usually science fiction, kind of fairy tale-esque types of things. And so I think a lot, I don't know, about fairy tales. And roses have this such an interesting role in fairy tales, like with their thorns, with their like fleshy bodies. And so I really wanted to do a rose wall within the airport that you could look out of and see Philadelphia beyond that. So I started working off of this drawing. And this is the biggest thing that I have ever made. At the end, I think it was 27 feet in length by 12 feet high. And I mean, it was so big that I couldn't fit it all into my house at one time. So I would just have to set it up in 6-foot sections and hope that that section would work with the section next to it. So my whole house had this stuff strewn across the floors for months. So most of my work travels outside my studio and takes up the rest of my world and my family's world. This is at Mainline Art Center. I was working, doing summer camp during the summer, and they let me have the room after camp was finished. And because it was such a huge room, I was able to map out what the piece was going to look like for the first time the day before the airport was coming to pick it up. And I was working down to the wire as well. So, I mean, this wasn't that they didn't let me have it before then. It was that it really wasn't ready at all until the day before it was about to be installed. And installation took 2 days. But they built me this really fabulous like strata with, I think it was deer fencing to put the piece on, and it's still there. It was originally supposed to be up for a year. It stayed up for 2 years. They decided to keep it for an extra year, and then the pandemic hit. So now it's been 3 years, and I really hope they keep it there because I love it there. And it's so huge. I don't know what I would possibly do with it if it wasn't there. These are some pieces that I was doing with the Kensington Hub, which is a mural arts sanctuary space. And I would go in weekly, and anybody who wants to come in and make art can come in and have coffee and snacks and knit. And based on the conversations I had with people in the space, I made a series of salamanders carrying those conversations around. A lot of the participants there have housing insecurities. So this was a purple salamander, fire salamander carrying around a bunch of little houses. And when I went the next week to go to work, it wasn't there. But on my way home, I noticed that it had moved across the street. So I really liked the idea that the salamanders kind of walked around the neighborhood carrying these pieces. So I did Sacred Hearts. I did the last one, Aliens. And I did fire salamanders because one of the participants called troubles that they had alligators. And so I was trying to think of something that was related to alligators, but in alchemy, there's a lot of interesting stuff that comes with salamanders, that they're born out of the fire. So I thought it was a positive symbol that could be walk around the neighborhood carrying these conversations. And the final piece was done at a local church, and it was just a series of salamanders crawling out of this kind of primordial fire puddle. I was asked to do a piece for Women's Day, for International Women's Day at the National Liberty Museum. So I wanted to make Arachne, since, you know, she's one of the original weavers. So it felt like something that made sense for me to do. With this piece was the first time, one of the first times, well, not really, but I wanted to do webbing, and I wanted it to be freestanding, and I wanted it to be able to curl down the entire staircase where the spider was going to be. And I did so much webbing that it would go from one room in my house all the way through, you can't really tell with this, but into the other room and around the bed. So like my whole house was covered in this stuff. And then when I got to the museum, it barely covered one wall. Like the space was so huge that I felt like it just was kind of this little like, meh, meh. But I got to reuse Arachne when I got to be featured as a Win Challenge artist at Fleisher. And I reused several of these, you'll notice, from the airport, but I made more poppies, and I had always wanted to make pieces that were behind the chain link, so you could see through the chain link to other crocheted elements behind them. And so I felt like this was my chance to really use the space and reuse some of these pieces, but to do with them what I'd always kind of envisioned doing, but never had the time to go that far. So with these, everything that gets higher up on the walls becomes freestanding and stiffened and more sculptural. And just working around the room. And there's Arachne. And so I made twice as much webbing for this piece so that I could actually have it hanging from the ceiling and hanging around the doors. And I put her on chain link because that felt kind of like her own web that she was perched on. And I wanted to make, since this was, Gerard, do you call it like the castle room? It has like a,
I believe that's the tower. Yeah.
Tower. Okay, well, it reminded me of a castle because of this awesome door. And so I really felt like it fit into my ideas of fairy tales and myth. So I tried to play that up to the nth degree. And I have a lot of tiny elements with this show also. I made snails. A lot of this I actually did while I was traveling in Indonesia, that my husband got a grant. And so I put all of my yarn in a giant backpack, and as we were traveling around the country, I made these things. And when we were in Singapore, there's these giant snails that look just like garden snails, except they're as big as your fist. So I made some snails to go on my roses. I think of all the black plants as kind of denuded roses. And three-dimensional bugs. And then all of this has kind of been brought together at the Dina Wind Art Foundation. So normally I either show drawings or I show crochet. And this show will be the first time that I've shown them all together. Just like this presentation is the first time I've actually talked about all of those things together. I feel like there was a progression and they make sense in my mind why I went from one to the other, but usually I try to keep them separate. And that's it.
All right, so I got many questions. Let's start with your drawings.
All right.
So, I noted the progressions. You started doing the chain links,
yeah,
and there were a lot of links in general in those to start with. Was that organic, how that happened, or was that something that you already decided, I'm gonna do chain links, or they just happen to live next to you?
I mean, it felt like I drew only wire for about a year, and then it went into chicken wire from there. And I was looking for something else to draw, but I wanted something that had movement to it. I wanted it to have structure and movement in the same way that I felt like that wire did, that you could scrunch it up, that it looked like water in certain instances. And so chain link, especially when I started going through their, rubbish bin, I just found some great pieces of it that had that same feeling to it. So it's like I was definitely out there looking for what the next thing would be that I wanted to draw. But I didn't expect it to like capture me quite the way it did.
And even though this is not what I was gonna ask next, but I'm envisioning you as explorer, like Dora the Explorer, like you have a backpack and you're going out to explore and you find this great item.
It's like I walk around and I'm always like looking for things that, have weird little patterns or that I could like scrunch up in different ways, and wherever I went, I would like collect, trash and debris and plants and everything else.
So right after the metals, then you moved to fruits. Is that correct? Would you say fruit was next?
I would say probably plants. So it was probably more the hydrangeas, the leaves, and then somebody introduced me to the Osage. Okay. And yeah. And
what is your process? Like did you make it sound like, oh, I just did this, that's it, it took me a minute. And I know it didn't.
Well, when I said that everything I do is really complicated, it's right. It started out with like, oh, I'm going to make this weird little thing, or I've found this pine cone that I think could work for me. But my preparation to even get there is pretty extensive. Like I said, I work on either paper or panel that's been gessoed and polished down to where it can really hold like the finest little bit of graphite. I use, I have like sandpaper right next to me because I can't actually sharpen my pencils to the fine tip that I would need. So I used really fine sandpaper to just constantly keep the tip of my pencils like right where I need them so they can hold that really fine line. And then it really just is kind of like taking a leap of faith. So it's like I would draw a pine cone. And like I said, I draw the pine cone the first time how it looks. So I don't take any tone out of it the first time or figure out what is interesting about it. It takes drawing it a couple of times for me to start to see what I like about an object. So with the hydrangea, for example, the first bits of hydrangea look like hydrangeas and I hated them. And that's when I realized that it was just those little dark areas between the veins of the petals that I was interested in. So with every object, I find the things that, I don't know, that resonate with me.
Can you actually erase when in that surface?
No. There's no erasing. So yeah, everything is exactly, yeah. So I've never.
No mistakes at all.
It's you have to, embrace it and make something out of all of your mistakes.
Right, right. I like that.
Yeah.
So wow, that's quite a process. So how long do you think like a smaller one would take you? I mean, I imagine that you go step by step and you look at it for a while and then come back to it. Is that your process?
Sometimes I start a lot of pieces and then, work on little bits and pieces of them as I go. But oftentimes I will just work until something is finished. And it's basically, I won't be able to do anything else to it. It just feels like I kind of get to a point, and I don't expect it. I usually expect to do a whole lot more on a piece. And suddenly I'll reach a point where I just physically can't continue with it. And that's when it's done.
Wow.
And they take at least 40 hours. So it's 40 hours plus. So the smallest one would be around that much time. And then, yeah, so like the longest I've worked on something is 3 months. And it was really working on it, you know, every day type of thing. But I mean, I do work during the day. So sometimes that means I work for 2 or 3 hours at night. And sometimes that means, you know, I'll work for, you know, 10 hours straight until my hand stops working.
Wow. So then you come to Philly, and in Philly, you start making these really giant installations, but the themes seem to remain. Like the chain link is there, the nature still, and I'm guessing you have a pretty good relationship with nature.
I have a degree in plant biology. And yeah, maybe I should have said that, but I spent, so before I went back to get my master's degree, I worked on a boat doing botanical oceanography and studying diatoms and looking through microscopes. So I'm really interested, I guess, in micro versus macro, in taking little tiny things and blowing them up. But also maybe taking big things and making them small, like playing with scale and what that means to us when we come across things in the world. Wow.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So now you're installing these huge things, and how's the reaction? I mean, you talk about people in their cars going right by you. Do they scream at you? Do they say something?
They usually take pictures of me recently. Okay. I felt like with the first few, they kind of ignored me. Like I felt like it was awkward for everybody. It was awkward for me, and I think it was awkward for them to see like these things like falling down on top of me, and like, you know, this person who obviously had no clue what I was doing. But also, I mean, people talk to me a lot when I'm putting these up, and I like that interaction. Like people show me pictures of their wife's crochet work. They show me, you know, pictures of their kids. I don't know, we have lots of conversations, and I try to encourage that. I feel like I'm out in the world putting things out there, so that I should, in fact, you know, talk to people as I'm doing it.
And I love that, you know, like, because I know that your process, you're working on your own. I mean, obviously your family is around, but you're doing these creations on your own in your studio. And then all of a sudden you put this out in the world, and you want to talk to everyone, you know, like after you've been... And that is kind of like at the end of the day, do you think that you really want the public to not only interact with them, but to be familiar with them, to live with them, right?
Well, I do. I mean, I mean, people have told me while I was putting them up that they were going to steal them, you know, soon. And I always try to convince them, you know, can you leave it up for a week? Can you try to leave it up for a little while? It's unlikely that someone else will, you know, take it right away. So you have some time.
The thread, I'm gonna steal it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I always am like, it's interesting that you would tell the person who made it that you're gonna take it soon. But I mean, I feel like that's the, you know, that's the deal. Like I put those up there and they come down, like I put them up with cable ties. So all someone really has to do is, you know, go through with some wire cutters and they've got themselves a thing.
Have they offered you money for it?
They have. Some people are like, oh, well, can you make me one? And okay. I always just feel like, well, no, you should steal it. Like, I encourage that. I just want you to wait a little while to do it. You know, like I want to move on to the next thing that I want to make. But yeah, I do encourage, like, at least I feel like if someone steals it, it has a good home. It's the pieces that get, you know, cut up into little pieces that I kind of feel this like, oh, heartbreak over.
Have you gotten requests for commissions? Like make my portrait kind of commission?
I haven't. I got that little alien in the UFO. People really liked that one. And I did get some requests, you know, could I make them one for them? But I don't think that people realize how long they take to make. I mean, even that little thing I think took, you know, like a week and I don't know, at least a week to make. And, you know, and so I don't like putting like monetary values sometimes on these things, especially when they're meant to go up in the world. Like I want people to enjoy them. I don't make them for the money. And so it makes me uncomfortable, the idea that someone would buy it.
So since you've been doing these installations, have you gone back to drawing or?
No, I've only drawn in order to communicate my ideas to other people. All of my work has been crochet, I think for the last maybe 5 years straight.
And what do you envision now? Do you envision yourself continuing with the?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Like, I mean, I feel like my crochet pieces have changed over the years from the first pieces that I did to what I'm doing now. And it feels more like I'm drawing with yarn. So it doesn't feel substantially different anymore. When I started, I really had no idea what I was doing. And so it was more trying to figure out the process of both putting things out in the world and how to crochet and how to combine color and how to make something. And I thought of them more as kind of funny things that had humor and something else at first. And I don't know, I guess it's in my nature to get more serious, you know, as I delve into things. So I took the, you know, funny little penguins and armadillos and turned them into, you know, giant bone flower poppies. So I don't know.
And I do know that you like collaborations from time to time. I mean, you work obviously with the kids, and I know you've done for the Free Library of Philadelphia, you did There,
yes,
which I believe is going to have a preview soon. Or
I'm very excited to put that up. That's another thing that I feel like happened right before the pandemic, and that we had a workshop and we made a giant Franklin flower at Fleisher. And I'm really excited to put it up. Again, it feels almost like this last year hasn't quite happened. It's this weird, I don't know, it's in between time.
Of course, yeah. And it kind of is for everyone, I think, right now that we're in that period where we're now awakening again and getting back to life, right? And so aside from right now, you have the gallery, the Dina Winner Foundation. You're in the viewing room for anyone who wants to see it. And what's next? Are you working on something right now?
I'm working on a permanent piece for Mainline Art Center that is going to be going over their main staircase. So this will be my first ceiling piece. And I felt like the area looked like a stream. And so that's what I'm making it into, with a giant, like 8 or 9 foot swimming frog. Because
wow. Well, and I love it when you said, because you really react to the environment and you really base your work on the environment that you're gonna put it at. But a lot of times, do you always know where it's gonna end up from the beginning, or when you're making it?
Well, this one, I mean, I had intended to do something else, and I tried to start making something else, but I really just felt like it was a stream and that I needed to make a giant frog. And I didn't expect the frog to actually become as big as it became. I thought it was going to be like some little smaller frog swimming in the stream. And instead it's like this, you know, it's bigger than I am by quite a bit. And it just kept growing and growing.
Is it true or false that you don't sketch these creatures and these creations?
No, I don't usually. Like I included the sketches that I have done, you know, like with the roses, I obviously did sketch that. With the spider, I sketched that. And I do try to sketch out sometimes, like, what does a leg look like where it connects to a body? Because I'm trying to figure out that shape. And, you know, doing it in this kind of abstracted media can be difficult. Like I look at a lot of stained glass actually and tattoos and try to see how other people who work on non-traditional canvases handle those types of things.
Now, does anyone have any questions? If you do, please feel free to put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask it. But you're right now in California, right?
I'm back in Philadelphia now.
You're back in Philly. Okay, good. Okay, good.
No, I was only there for a week, and
okay.
Now,
yeah. So was it hot? Was it hot there too?
It was 95 degrees there. It was.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah, it was just shocking coming from like the 65-degree weather here and overcast to Sacramento, you know, the Central Valley, where it's like you hit a wall when you walk outside.
In which part of California were you raised?
Sacramento.
Sacramento, okay.
So yeah, not near the ocean or near the mountains. It's just right, you know, in the center of the state.
Have you ever put one of your pieces in California?
I do. I whenever I'm back, I try to put something up.
Okay.
But it hasn't really worked out the last couple times I've been back, and I had the pieces ready to go, but I don't know, circumstances, you know, when you're not like living someplace, sometimes don't work out very well. So I still have those pieces. I actually have not put very much up since the pandemic started, and so I have a pile of work that is ready to go out.
Wow.
So soon, since I'm vaccinated, I will be going out in the world and putting up like all of the things that I've been making for this last year.
Wow, that's excellent. Well, stay tuned, because I believe one of them will be in the Fleisher parking lot. I think it's gonna live. So that should be maybe there in June. And I know there's other possibilities. So do visit your website. That's the best way to know where you're at.
Yeah, I guess so. So that's bindingthings.com, or you can look me up on Instagram, which is again, you know, at Binding Things.
So thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you, Jessica, for sharing tonight with me. This was awesome. Thank you. I actually learned many new things about you, so I love it. If no one has any questions, then thank you for saying beautiful things about Jessica. I'll say good night. And this is the last of this series for this season, but we'll be back in the fall. So please stay tuned. And in the meantime, good night, everyone.